So today we'll be talking about building a digital branch your users will love. Certainly, I think it's a timely topic. We're all seeing increased use of our websites, of our virtual presence. In some cases, we didn't have a choice because your branch may have closed for a period of time. Speaking personally, I'm located in New York. We kind of got punched in the face back in March, and mid-March had closed and didn't reopen to the public until right after the 4th of July. And with a few, shutdowns here and there, we've largely been operating differently, but in person. So that's kind of where I'm at. Our approach today, I'm kind of going to be throwing the kitchen sink at you. Digital branch is an expansive topic. It's kind of like saying how to library, but online. But that said, what I do want to focus on is kind of covering the best practices, right? How can we deliver the best digital branch possible? Understand the present environment. Listen, COVID-19 is the kind of the elephant in the room, and it has changed user behaviors in many ways. And understanding those changes, some of which are short-term, some of which may be long-term changes, will help us best serve the public. So understanding that kind of that present environment with all this rapid change that's going on. And then I want to set aspirational goals. I will tell you, sometimes I go to presentations and the speaker is excellent and they have great ideas, but it's a little deflating for me because they're doing stuff that seems so awesome and so difficult to match. And I want to hear about failures too. I don't just want to hear about successes. And so what I want you to understand is the things I'm talking about today is delivering the best possible branch you can deliver. That's aspirational. We don't all get there. I don't get there. So we're going to see what is the best we can do with an understanding of your goal is always to continually work towards that. It's a journey, not a destination. Okay, so when I give you a greatest hits reel, don't feel like that's how everything is. So I want to start by taking a trip back in time. And this is actually the first library I worked at. This is where I kind of cut my teeth, is at the Mastix Mauritius Shirley Community Library, also Suffolk County, New York. And I'm taking you back to an ancient time, 1998, which as far as the internet was concerned, is pretty ancient times. If you're not familiar with the Wayback Machine, definitely check it out. It's a great way of looking at an archived version of the internet. It's basically snapshots of the internet at different times. So this is my first library I worked at, and this is 1998. And this is our website, which I will tell you for 1998, this is a pretty awesome website. It is the bee's knees. I guess in the 90s, what is it? It's the Daddy Mac, it's the bomb.com. I could go on, but this is a very good website for 1998. But I want to draw your attention to a few things. You'll see here, I've kind of outlined, I got an arrow pointing to our search bar where you can search the catalog. I also have our reference databases highlighted. Those are really the only dynamic pieces of this website. This is directory information, right? It's a lot of understanding how your library looks and works, and the things you can do at the physical branch. But this isn't terribly interactive. This isn't terribly service oriented. Outside of, I can access reference databases, and sure, I can search a catalog, but at this time, it's only print and analog material. So I still have to come to the library to act on any of this. And just to highlight again, that site is almost entirely informational, right? That's like a page from the yellow books. It's largely a collection of static information, the exception being the databases there. Everything else is a referral to our physical services, our building, our collection. And a good exercise is just to imagine, take your website and then imagine your physical branch ceases to exist. And some of us may have had to do that, at least temporarily, right? Our physical sites were closed. If in 1998, my physical branch was closed, how useless is that website, right? Because there's nothing else behind the curtain there. I could access databases, and that's it. And that's only if I had a library card already. There's no way for me even to get a card outside of visiting my physical branch. So that's a very traditional website. Again, for 1998, that's a great website. But that's not what a digital branch is, in particular in the year 2021. Now we're going to fast forward, and this is the South Huntington Public Library. Again, Suffolk County, New York. I didn't travel too far, but this is my current job is out South Huntington, although this site predates me. This is the year 2007. I've been at South Huntington about 3 years. Now, I won't tell you how long we kept the site for because it's it's a sore spot for me, but certainly from 1998 to 2007, this is a more graphical site, right? The things I've highlighted, I want you to draw your attention to is you have Get Answers 24/7. So here is a real live librarian online, a virtual reference service. In our case, we were super ambitious. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We realized that's a terrible idea eventually. It's just untenable to staff at that level. However, that's service oriented, right? That's staffed. That's something that's interactive that you can engage with. You have language learning services I've highlighted here. And we've gotten more service oriented, things like lynda.com, Rosetta Stone, all of these services that are real and you can experience them over the web. And then finally at the bottom here, initially an afterthought, but that's when we started really getting big into digital collections. That was our first ebook audiobook service we called Suffolk Wave, because for Suffolk County, Suffolk Wave sounded pretty awesome at the time. We dropped that title eventually. But here you can see kind of the progression, right? But I want to take you a few more years forward. 2021, present day, behold the future with a present. And listen, behind the scenes, there's a lot going on now. Books, movies, music, that's a lot of digital content. But the things I want to draw your attention to, again, we've expanded reference services. You can text us now, you can email us, you can do all those things. The My Account is something that isn't just viewable, it's actionable. Now, some of it might not be fun. You can pay your fines. That's not anything to get excited about. However, now you can get a digital library card, which is super important. You have a card option here. We've expanded to Learn Online. This is a lot of service-oriented stuff. And then most importantly, and at least contemporary for a lot of us, I've highlighted here virtual programs. Now, we've had program calendars for a long time. What we now have is a program calendar with the program is embedded. It's Premiere videos, largely hosted on YouTube. So now the program itself is in digital format. And it's happening within the scope of our website. So as you've seen this progression, right, from 1998 to present day, the characteristics of a digital branch, it's not just a website, okay? It's interactivity over information. There's engagement there. There's personal assistance. There's an actual collection in digital format. It's service oriented. And finally, and most importantly, it's staffed. It's staffed like your physical building. If you think back to the early days of a website, sure, you have a webmaster and they make sure the site's up to date and they do some stuff, but it's not staffed in the same way that your library is staffed, right? And so that's one of the characteristics, and perhaps the most important of a digital branch is there's people doing the reference work. There's people behind the scenes there that are curating the collection, that are doing the troubleshooting. So I want you to think about staffing as one of those key components of a digital branch. And that's something that's changed because a lot of this stuff has grown from an afterthought. Digital collections a few years ago were something, yeah, we're trying this out, and they've grown in importance. Our web presence has grown in importance. And sometimes the funding, sometimes the staffing and the attention has lagged given the importance. And COVID-19 has kind of forced the issue because COVID-19 hasn't created these trends, but it has accelerated existing trends to move towards digitization, virtual presence, all of those things. And finally, lest we get too fixated on the website, your digital branch extends beyond your website. And it's actually one of your challenges here. Your digital branch is in part your social media presence. It's your business page and directories. You have a Facebook for business page, whether you like it or not, or I should say Google for business. You may have Yelp pages. All of these things kind of happen with or without your participation. I strongly encourage you to claim these sites so you can correct inaccuracies. There's third-party services. Functionally, our digital branches are a bunch of third-party services we've stitched together, right? You might have Hoopla, and you might have Overdrive, and you might have Canopy, and all of these, and EBSCO, and all of these things that you bring together, trying to have a library, but really they're a series of third-party services. Those are part of your digital branch. And then finally, you may or may not have a mobile app. You may have developed an app specific to your library. And so earlier I told you, we're going to have aspirational goals, so, right? If you want to deliver the best possible library you can, then your goal needs to be seamlessness, because your digital branch, your digital presence, is a series of third-party services. It's all of these things, and if it's done poorly, they're stitched together like Frankenstein's monster. If they're done perfectly, nobody even knows they're a bunch of third-party services. It feels like one uniform library experience. And so that is your aspirational goal, is to take many separate pieces and turn them into one consistent, and I should say excellent, library experience. That's not easy. None of us have probably accomplished it, at least perfectly. So websites have changed, right? I think that's demonstrated by that awesome website I showed you in 1998, that, all right website I showed you in 2007, and then the present one, which I'm pretty happy with. But even though websites have changed, so have user behaviors. Again, yes, COVID-19 is the elephant in the room. COVID-19 has accelerated these trends, the trend towards digital. I'm sure you see more ebook usage and streaming movies and all of those things. Oddly enough, audiobooks, your digital audiobooks, probably grew at around 15, 20%, which is actually a slowing of the growth of that, partially because there's less commuter traffic with everybody working from home. Less commuting is less people with Bluetooth listening to audiobooks. That's a short-term blip. Expect that to increase. And that's where you got to be kind of sophisticated with how we interpret some of the data we get. But in that distance learning environment, in that telecommuting environment, your public has a greater comfort with video conferencing in a way that they hadn't in the past. Maybe they were forced into it, but now they're competent with that. And maybe they like it. And maybe now that's an expectation for them with how the library should work. Look at what happens in private industry and expect that people have the same expectation for the public. Okay, they want the convenience that they see when they go to Amazon, when they do grocery pickup. And along those lines, the trend is increased online shopping, pickup, contactless pickup. Things are more transactional. For any of us that have done curbside, I think we recognize that. People have always had a constantly shrinking attention span. That's only gotten worse, I guess. And you can tell I don't like it, but it certainly, attention spans are not getting longer. And that's important to understand. And visuals are key. I want you to put yourself, many of us are big fans of restaurants. Certainly for me, I haven't sat in a restaurant in some time, but I have eaten at done a lot of takeout. And think about how you assess what restaurant you want to go to right now. It's probably based on how easy it is to order, how convenient, how good the site looks. Do you have visuals? Visuals are important. You want to know what your food or your service that you're buying looks like before you get it, because you can't do that in-person experience, or maybe you're less likely to do it. So understand those things, because those are things that are affecting patron behavior. Those are a lot of short-term trends I showed you, right? The biggest change, and this is one that's been happening for some time, is the shift to mobile. This is a long-term trend that is only continued. The year 2016, that is the year that mobile traffic surpassed desktop traffic, and it has not looked back. More people now are accessing the internet than ever before via mobile device, smartphone and tablet. Between 2011 and 2018, and I want to point out, these are all from the Pew Research Center, their mobile fact sheet, which is a fantastic piece of information you'll want to check out. But between 2011, 2018, smartphone ownership went from 35% of adults in America to 81%. 42% of patron time online is mobile. So they're spending less time compared to desktop, but it accounts for 58% of visits. That's important to understand. People are doing more visits with a smartphone, but less time. They're not doing deep dives. They're doing quick transactional things. Think of it almost like the curbside of web browsing. They know what they want. They want to get it quick. They're not doing a lot of clicks. They're not spending a lot of time. They're very quick. They're very transactional. So with the understanding that people are accessing your website this way, make sure that the important stuff isn't buried. It's not enough just to look good on a phone. It has to be useful. Again, growing tablet ownership, growing use of mobile purchases. People are more comfortable now making mobile purchases. That may affect, how you decide in terms of if you're charging for programs. Do you support e-commerce on your site? The nice part, at least, I guess if you like a duopoly, maybe it's not a nice thing, but it used to be where you had to figure out what the heck was going to come in the door, what type of device, what was it going to look like, what operating system. That by and large is over, okay? Android and iOS, or Apple's operating system, is now 98% of the mobile market share. 100 devices walk in the room, 98 of them are going to be either Apple or Android. That's something to think about. Make sure when you're testing, you're just testing for those two, really. When you're training your staff on an operating system and their comfort with it, those are the two you have to focus on. And what's interesting is 20% of Americans now have smartphone-only internet access. That has grown in the last few years. It used to be about 12%, just I believe 3 years ago. 1 in 5 Americans, their internet access is smartphone only. And it's actually a younger crowd that tends to do that. These are folks that are very comfortable navigating hotspots in the community. Also, predominantly, it's lower income. So keep that in mind. Whenever we talk about mobile, it turns into the great debate. Do you need a library app, right? App or no app? And I'm going to give you a very unsatisfying answer. Which is, the answer is, it depends. It really depends. So I'm going to look at a few ways to kind of to evaluate a mobile app before we kind of get into it. I just want to stop for a moment and see if any questions have kind of piled up before we have this great debate on mobile app or not.
So far, I don't see any questions yet.
Okay, and so I'm going to keep going. What you may want to do, depending, if you have a burning question, type it in the chat. If I cover it while I still talk before I get to that, great. If I don't, we can definitely follow up. So functionally, do I need an app? Don't I need an app? Answer is it depends. So the pros and cons of a library app. The pros, and this is ideal, okay? You can get an app that's really terrible. It doesn't check off a lot of boxes, but a good app has user customization. I can configure the app maybe to show the things I want to see, to highlight the services. Maybe I can reorder things. It has user customization. Most importantly, it has service integration. What I mean by that, we talked about how your website is like a series of third-party services all stitched together. How nice would it be if I can just put in my barcode once and I can access all of your digital collections, and I can access my patron record, and it appears seamless? That's something that if you can get an app to deliver that, that's excellent. That's a big check in the pro column. Digital library cards. Can I apply for a card via the app? Can I store the card in my app? Is it screen readable? Do you have scanners in the library? And then offline access. I think all of us are very familiar now with issues of digital inequity, right? We're finding out, hey, if you do virtual school, you might want to check to make sure that people have home internet access, kind of important. So if you're serving a community where there's issues of digital inequity, and that's most communities, if you have a rural community where the internet is spotty, where broadband access isn't there, an app that has offline access that you can do some things, that's a big plus. On the con side, added cost, it costs more. It's more time, it's more money. It's an additional site to maintain. It's going to have its own set of eyes that has to keep it up to date. If you've ever installed an app, then you know there's privacy concerns. That's one of the great debates in libraries, is delivering convenience without costing people's privacy. When you install an app, you're going to get all those prompts. Can I access your phone and do your pictures and videos? All of those things you have to be very okay with. So there's privacy concerns there. And of course, it requires action on the patron's part. They have to download the app. They have to update the app. If they don't, it starts getting junked up. It may not work for them. On the other end, a mobile responsive site, and that's a website that adjusts to the screen size. And that's really where you have to be right now in the year 2021. But if you have a mobile responsive website, some of the pros, you build and maintain a single site. That's cost effective, less time, less money. There's no action that your users have to take, right? They don't have to download anything. They don't have to update anything. They're getting the current version of your site. Your patrons, they can navigate with the browser of their choice. That means they can go, use incognito mode or privacy mode, private browsing. They can preserve their privacy. They can engage with your site with the browser of their choice. That's empowering your user. Negatives, you have internet connectivity is required, no internet, no website. Generally speaking, you're not going to have a lot of customization options. And let's face it, apps are convenient. Sure, somebody can favorite your website. Sure, they can create a desktop shortcut. Most people don't. Most people want an app. They install the app. They're comfortable with the app. They tap the app. It builds a certain muscle memory. There's a certain convenience there. So that's how you're going to have to evaluate app or no app. If you can get an app to do a lot of those great things and it checks off a lot of boxes, then go get an app. If you're just doing an app to have an app, that's money wasted. It's not doing anything for you. Those are the ways you're going to evaluate and then make an informed decision. Excuse me. So best practices now for the three components of your digital branch. Now, these are three components I kind of think about with a digital branch, okay? There's more to them. But functionally, I'm interested in collections, your digital collection, your services, and remember, we're getting more and more service oriented with these digital branches. And then finally, this kind of new one for us in many ways, which is programs, at least in a virtual format. So looking at digital collections, when we talk about delivering the best digital branch you can for users, you have to start with addressing cardholder access. If I don't have a library card, I don't have a library. And for me, when we were closed for months, we needed to give people a way to get digital cards because they couldn't come in. They had no way to resolve any cardholder issues. That's something that there's an expectation that's got to continue. The ideal is if I'm engaging with your branch digitally, I'm strictly a digital borrower. Why should I have to come into your library? That's not convenient. Of course, there's reasons why we make people come in. Of course, we have concerns and want to make sure that we can verify IDs and we can, we're protecting a taxpayer funded institution. But really the ideal is cardholder access, getting people e-cards, or at least having an online application, making a process so I have a way to prove identity without coming in. Because then I can go from the website to immediately using your services. The next piece, when I look at your digital collection, is you have to properly allocate resources. Again, this is where COVID-19's put us in a tight spot. All of you, I am sure, have been putting more money into digital collections. You've been doing this for years. COVID-19 suddenly said, okay, whatever 5-year plan you have for addressing this, do it now. And so you have had to pivot quickly, and you may continue to have to. Tons of new users have just used our digital branch for the first time, have used our digital collections for the first time. Many new users. And so they will continue to use it. You are going to see increased demand from here on out. Your digital collections need money. It means reallocating resources quicker than you thought, diverting from the things that aren't working, that maybe are underperforming. You know, as Disney Plus has kind of destroyed the need maybe for the back catalog of DVDs, you start reallocating that money. It demands your attention. Early on, I've had like libraries that I've worked at where it's one, maybe two people that are responsible for the digital collection, that curate your databases. When all of a sudden it goes from 3% of your circulation to now it's 30, 40, 50% of your circulation, you would never put one person in charge of your entire print collection at the library. It's like you have 100 employees, but only one of them buys all the books. But that's the position we found ourselves in over time, in some cases, when it comes to your digital collection. It needs more eyeballs, and it means more staff so that you can be hyper responsive. When somebody puts in a request, it gets filled quickly. That the collection development is happening in a way that puts your best foot forward. And your digital collections now demand more space. And by space, I mean space on your website. The more space and prominence you give something, that should be commensurate to its importance. The most important stuff on your website should be at the top, right? And it should occupy the biggest space and maybe be the most graphical and eye-catching. Early on, I had a website that all of the new stuff, we only ever added stuff. We never took stuff away. So all the new stuff just kept going on the bottom, and the site kept getting longer. That's a terrible way to do things. Don't ever do that. So it's a time to stop and look at your site and say, is the space I'm giving and the prominence I'm giving to things reflective of how important they are to the library, how much money I'm throwing at them, how much time and resources, and how important they are to our operation. You got to meet user demand. I know this is tough. I know, with ebook pricing, it seems like it's a hopeless task, but you do the best you can. And part of that may be experimenting with different lending models. There's a difference between one copy, one checkout, or metered access, or collections where it's always available. I like to call them all you can eat, something like tumble books. I pay the fee, and then those books are always available, and it doesn't matter how many simultaneous users. You have to get experimental with the lending models you're using and find a balance that allows people to have something to check out, that stretches your money as best you can. Maybe even you curate some of the open source stuff. New York Public Library Simply e-collection. There's copyright-free materials with Vox Libra. Those are audiobooks, those types of things. And then finally, again, just like if I don't have a card, I can't use your digital collection. If I don't know how to use your stuff, I can't borrow. So you need to be able to assist patrons in their chosen format. And that means assisting them in a variety of formats. Might mean live help, in-person help. It might mean virtual help via video chat. It might mean having pre-recorded videos or third-party services. There's things like Niche Academy that are tutorials, printouts. Give people enough options. Some folks, they can just click on the help site and that's enough. Some of us are more visual. Give people help in a variety of formats. Let them choose the one that works best for them. I'm about to move on to services, but I did want to check and see if anything's kind of piled up as I was talking quite a bit.
Yes, we have one question that is, please talk about the mobile-only community and how best to serve them. They said, we have lots of them that we want to reach.
So it's tricky. Functionally, with your mobile, people who are mobile only, okay, that 20% of people who are reliant on Wi-Fi. Obviously, what can the library do? I think we've found ourselves often that whenever there's a financial crisis, a public health crisis, they take all our money away, and then we're asked to kind of cure society's ills, right? So they're like, quick, fix digital inequity everywhere. So for somebody who is mobile only, a couple things you can do. You are one of the ways they access the internet. So you are going to want to do what you can to expand internet access. Just extending the hours is helpful. So if your Wi-Fi is cutting off at 9, you close at 9 o'clock, your Wi-Fi turns off at 9, just getting a couple of outside access points, outdoor access points, extending your Wi-Fi into the parking lot is helpful. Extending the hours of operation is helpful. If you can curate other community partners that have Wi-Fi access and making that known and available to people, that's helpful. Then making sure that your services, when you're choosing digital content, when you're choosing databases, do it with the knowledge that 1 in 5 of your users, if it doesn't work on a phone, it doesn't work for them. So those are the starts. And constantly assess your programs, your services, what you're doing, imagining that you're doing it on a mobile phone and see if that works. That's a good starting point.
That was our only question as of now.
Okay, great. And again, I can always revisit it if I haven't answered it accurately, but I want to, we're going to talk services now. And so one of the things that has always kind of peeved me is we always say our digital branch is open 24/7. We say that when we have a snow closure. We say that, you know, when you have a public health crisis, like, don't worry, library is closed, but our digital branch is open 24/7. Is it? I'm inclined to say, no, it's not. Can I get live help at any time, 3 a.m., you're gonna help me? I suspect the answer is no. You need, if you're gonna be a full service branch, you need to establish hours of operation. When can I get help and in what format? And embrace new formats. That means text, email, and if you want to be live and have, like, instead of asynchronous communication, just have a real back and forth, chat is important as well. Chat is labor intensive because when I'm chatting with you, I'm typing, I'm not going to wait 10 minutes for a response because I'm on your page waiting. That's something that's staffed. This is the time to really start utilizing video conferencing. There's a lot of services that libraries offer that are really suited to this format. One-on-one appointments, career counseling, job interviews, if you do any of those things. If you have third-party services, social workers, you know, use video chat, get reliant on that. And that's part of building your best digital branch. And finally, you know, I've kind of worn many hats through my career, and now I'm management, okay? But part of my task is putting my staff in a spot where they can succeed. It's not just adding expectations and not helping. You need to provide staff with resources. That means training, and that means off-desk time. You know, because you're providing virtual reference, it doesn't mean you can still staff a public desk and have patrons engaging with you in front of you when you're trying to serve somebody on a computer. So it means giving people adequate training on the things you're asking them to do, giving them the time and opportunity to learn it. And then, of course, making sure that their attention isn't divided. If you want to serve your digital customers best, you can't be doing both physical and digital at the same time. Because then the patron in front of you thinks you're ignoring them or you're buying shoes or something. And the person on the other end doesn't know you're distracted because you're engaging with a customer in front of you. I think, unfortunately, libraries, we always add more responsibilities. We never take anything away, and then we all drown. So that's something you got to look at.
Nick, we do have a question.
Sure.
What service do you use to text patrons?
So I use Mozio. And I always say I'm not a pitch man. I'll tell you what I use. And, we use Mozio. It's text to librarian. And it has, I believe last I looked at it, has a text option. You type in your question, and then it's text or email. And there's also a chat function I believe you can enable. The only chat service I have historically used, and this was years ago when it was kind of a new, scary environment, was called Zopim, Z-O-P-I-M. And that's something you see in a lot of websites, that built-in customer stuff, real-time customer service. But yeah, Mozio Text to Librarian is the text service. You type in your question, you check off a box, text or email, and then we get back to you in your chosen format. And that's got a widget if you choose to use the widget. And it's mobile friendly. And that's all I'll say about that.
That's our last question.
What's that?
That's our only question for right now.
Okay. So let's talk virtual programs, something we've all kind of tried out and then dove into and are now like, oh, what's happening? And how long do we do this? I feel like we do this forever, just not as much, okay? I think a lot of the services that we've tried out, you don't take away. You just moderate a little more, find out what the balance is. And so with virtual programs, the ideal is website integration. And that means utilizing your program calendar. So one of the things we've done with our virtual programming as we were feeling it out is we were using a lot of YouTube Premiere. So we were embedding Premiere videos directly into our program calendar. So the calendar entry was the program. You'd click on, whatever make and take program. The video would be there. It would be kind of a coming soon screen up until the video premiered, and then you could watch it at any time. That was making patrons comfortable with. They were used to using our program calendar. They found the event in the calendar, and then it was right there for them to take advantage of. So that's one of the ways to integrate those things. If you have things that are more appointment-based, things like Calendly and being able to schedule an appointment is useful as well. Make them feel a part of your website. You can't do that with everything. You can do it with some things. And then make them accessible. Now, accessible means many things, okay? From an ADA standpoint, captioning is key, and we'll talk about that a little more in a bit. But captioning is very important. Even aside from ADA, about 60, 70% of people on social media watch video without the sound on, and you need to understand that. So captioning is important to all users. Separately, and this is my own opinion here, with social media, early on, because we were suddenly asked to reinvent the library in 5 seconds, right? When, when in mid-March we closed, our initial program platform was Facebook. Facebook is not a program platform. It's one we use because we had to use a platform. But understand that we know that Facebook is terrible with privacy. And you shouldn't need to have a Facebook account in order to use the library. Yes, it's an outlet. Yes, we are on Facebook because our users are on Facebook and we want to engage with them. But that's where you may wish to move away from something, use another service, host a video directly on your website. We really relied heavily on YouTube, in part because there was no account needed. And I was also very happy with the auto captioning compared to Facebook, which was playing catch up with that. You also have to understand what's called FANG. And I actually added another A. It used to only be one A. FANG is Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. These are all services that are heavily invested in video, right? Google, you have YouTube. Facebook video is a thing now. Apple TV, Amazon Prime, Netflix, of course. These are all mega corporations that hate each other, okay? And for example, for those of you who do programs in YouTube, and then you post your YouTube video on Facebook, I am sure you have noticed that it gets very little engagement. And that's not your fault. Your program may be excellent. Facebook punishes YouTube traffic because they see them as a competitor and they suppress it. If you have the raw file and you post that raw video, your MPEG-4, into Facebook, Facebook makes that video much more visible to users. They're more likely to see it in their feed because Facebook wants their video to succeed. So just understanding that there are evil forces beyond your control that are affecting how prominent your videos are. And if you're relying heavily on social video for your virtual programs, you need to be aware that this is some of the stuff you're navigating. With our virtual programs, because they're new, we may not have an assessment standard. I've spent quite a bit of time now at my own library coming up with some assessment standards. How do I count butts in the seat? What does attendance look like? And now that I have a structure, and this is why you have to build a structure, I can assess programs to see what's working and what's not. And at its most basic, be responsive, do more of the stuff that's working and less of the stuff that isn't. But first, you need to be able to have an assessment tool in place. And finally, when we talk about virtual programming and putting it on your calendar is a good first. Engaging in email marketing is essential. That's delivering programs to your public. And if you're using curated audiences, that is having specific content for specific audiences, like having a children's e-newsletter and a teen e-newsletter and a senior e-newsletter, or just interest groups within, allows you to deliver content directly to your patrons. And because it's happening in email in a digital format, they are one click away from registering or attending. It's actionable. We talked about mobile trends. Your mobile users check their email 3 times more than desktop, okay? So it's also naturally suited for these trends of increased mobile use. Now, when we talk more about traditional accessibility, ADA compliance, making sure that you're delivering a site that's accessible, you need to look at something called Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Currently, we're in 2.1. 2.2 is coming out soon in 2021. On the bottom of the screen here, I have a good spot to get started where you can look at some of these accessibility guidelines. So you're designing a site that's up to web standards, that's up to accessibility standards. Beyond that, and this is something that has been challenging for me, it's making sure you're using alt text everywhere, that you're describing the images you're using. And remember, your digital branch is more than just your website. That's where I feel like I have to play a lot of whack-a-mole, because then there's a social media post on Facebook and I'm like, you didn't use alt text, or you have a graphic and you have no explanation of it. With our current website, happily, the structure of the website forces alt text, okay? But just because you're forced to do something doesn't mean you're doing it well. Constantly, I'm working to improve the descriptions we're using. But that's one of the things. Alt text, captioning, following web content accessibility guidelines. I was happy to see earlier there was a presentation right on serving users with dyslexia. This also means testing using user groups. Built-in software solutions can help make your site accessible as well. We use a service, and again, I am not a pitchman, I am not compensated. We have a service on our website, at shpl.info, info, called Browse Aloud. That, you click on it, it does language translation, it does resizing of text. I can highlight text and have it read to me. It can convert the entire page into an MP3. It can change contrast. It does a lot. Built-in accessibility tool, not just somebody having to come into the library and use Zoom text or something. And again, this is another thing that's a journey, not a destination. You have to constantly work on this. I am never satisfied with what we've done. We always have to do better. And it's not enough just to meet mandatory requirements. Would that be something you put on your resume? Is like somebody asked me about my library experience, and I say, "Oh yeah, I've got 20 years of doing the bare minimum that is legally required for my community." That's not terribly impressive. So yes, meet your legal obligations, but go beyond and do your best and understand that it requires constant attention. Again, when we're talking about serving all users, multiple language support. Again, the Browse Aloud tool I'm using has built-in translation for the site, which is helpful. But understanding that your digital branch, one of the key components is staffing, is do you have help in commonly spoken languages? If you have a large Spanish-speaking community, do you have staff that speak Spanish that are doing your virtual reference, that are curating your databases? Is your foreign language collection up to snuff? And not just Harry Potter translated into Spanish. Do you have, original materials in native languages? What third-party vendors are you using? And again, you're trying to deliver a uniform experience. Do they have their own gateways that are in other languages? Are their sites translatable? Are they accessible? Making sure. And then again, with speakers of languages other than English, do you have a distinct page or a gateway, or are you simply translating things into Spanish, into Korean, into other languages? That's something you have to look at as well. And that's where I want to reiterate that perfecting your digital branch, there is no point, it's a journey, not a destination. You never, clap your hands and say, I've done it. I have the perfect digital branch. I am now going to go and, binge watch something on Netflix. It requires constant action on your part. That means continuously updating, looking at those, web content accessibility guidelines, user testing, soliciting feedback from your community, monitoring those web standards, and then not just collecting statistics, which we all do, but then interpreting and acting on them, evaluating your digital collections and seeing what works and what doesn't, and what model works best for you, with the understanding that you have a budget and finite resources. Collecting program statistics with these virtual programs that are understandable, that are apples to apples, if it happens on Facebook or it happens on YouTube or it happens over Zoom, so that you can see what's working and do more of that and pull back from the things that aren't working. So that's my contact information. At this point, I'm happy to take any questions. Definitely feel free to connect. I'm on most social media, I think, and I hope this has been helpful.
We have quite a few questions.
Oh boy.
So let me just make sure I'm starting with the right ones. Okay, so Amy says we can text reminders about books from our ILS, but not about programs or events. Should we be texting everything?
So I will tell you that you have to find a balance. Early on, I told you we did a lot on Facebook, and we found that we were bombarding our public with so many notifications that it was actually harming our attempts. I'm a big fan when it comes to programs and services of using e-newsletter, because email isn't terribly objectionable. People see it, they're going to like it or not. If they don't want to receive the email anymore, any of these services you use, you can just say no thanks and be pulled off the mailing list. And if you're curating your audiences carefully, hopefully most of the stuff they're seeing is stuff that they're interested in. That's where I would rely more so on email for that, less so on texting.
Okay, can you spell the Mozio? Can you spell that? I tried to paste a link and someone else found another link, so we want to make sure we have the right one.
Okay, it's MOSIO. And the service itself should be called Text a Librarian. I'm going to grab my phone and Google it as well.
It takes me to a sign-in page. That was the link I saved there. But go back. I found another link I will post right here.
Yeah, I think that's an issue with their own SEO, where it seems like it wants to take you to the staff page rather than. But yeah,
Okay.
there's certainly other third-party services. We've been using Mozio for some time. Without a doubt, if you start looking at tech services, you can find something that's not even library specific. Functionally, you want something that is has a widget option that's embeddable in your site. And with any third-party service, you're going to want to look at the privacy as well when you are evaluating it.
All right. Another person asked, what calendaring system do you use?
So we are using Library Market. So we use their calendar, their events calendar. They also were our web developer. So everything is of a piece. In terms of anything you're using that's mobile responsive, hopefully is allowing you to also embed video. Most content management systems that are either Drupal based or WordPress based ought to help you there. If you're using like older Evanced, I don't know if that's gonna.
So someone asked, what's the difference in an e-newsletter and an email?
Functionally, they're the same thing. An e-newsletter, what it's doing is allowing you to have like kind of an HTML frame. So you're getting what looks like a web page within your site versus sending out individual emails. So the e-newsletter is one big aggregate, okay? It's got a bunch of things to it that's clickable. It's like sending a web page that's embedded within the email. And there are many services you can look at, both the library specific, like Orange Boy, Library Aware, and then there's other ones that are just commercial options, MailChimp. Why am I blacking out on a bunch? And feel free, folks, in the chat, if you have an option you're happy with. And many of these will allow either trials where you can check it out, or in some cases have free options, at least under a certain number of users. Although for a library, you're pretty quickly going to have to pay. Constant Contact was the other one I was thinking about. But the key component is people sign up for their interest, children's programs, for example, or library news. And then when you publish, it goes to those specific lists.
All right. We don't currently have another question, so feel free to type in if you do have a question. Have a few more minutes left. Going back through and just making sure I found them all. All right. Well, you will be receiving a copy of these slides as well as the recording from this session. So you will, you'll be receiving that pretty soon. And if you missed anything, you can go back and find it there. I don't see any other questions still. So a lot of thank yous, and this was fantastic. So that's awesome.
Great. And like I said, I'm always happy to talk tech. If you want to find me on Twitter, I have a website with a contact. You can definitely reach out there. Facebook is the one I'm least present on at this point.
All right.